Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at the new remote from SofaBaton, which is their new U2 remote. I do also have their old U1 remote that I've been comparing it against. I've already done an unboxing video, so first we'll just take a quick look at that. So this is the original, so this is the U1. So as you can see, this is their more basic smart remote that SofaBaton produce. And today what we'll do is we'll do a very quick unboxing of the new one. Okay, so opening up the box, the first thing you're presented with is the user manual. It gives you once again the QR codes for the actual apps on both iOS as well as Android. And it gives you some basic information in terms of how to set it up, how to do the basic usage. Put that to the side. We'll take the remote out. We'll just quickly take a look at what else we get. So it does come with some batteries. So that's a nice touch, the fact that they've actually included the batteries. And I think that should be it, yes. In terms of what comes in the box, very simple. So first thing we'll do is we'll just take a quick comparison between the two. So this one has been in use, so I've been using this at my parents' house. It's perfect for them because it's basically only the three things that they actually make use of. So they have Sky Q, they've got the Panasonic TV, and they've got a Fire TV stick that we use when we go down. So it's perfect for that because it can just quickly switch between the three devices using this scroll wheel. Original complaints were the fact that this back cover is almost impossible to get off without breaking your nails off when you first get it. Even now, it's still very, very stiff. The only way that you can actually get it off is to put a knife or a fork or something in here and pry it up. So that was one of the complaints from the original ones, and that's something that they have actually changed, and possibly my feedback might have actually told them about that. So yeah, that's so much easier in comparison to this one, where now that I've loosened it off, it may be a bit easier. No, it's not. So yeah, that's still extremely difficult to get off, whereas this one just clips straight off. Now that might make it a little easier for this to fly off if you were to drop it, but to be fair, I've never actually dropped the original one, so I don't see that being a big issue. Right, so side-by-side comparison, button at the top is almost in identical position. One thing I have noticed straight away is all of these buttons protrude just a tiny bit more. So if we take a look at that, they're very shallow buttons. In terms of the feel of the buttons, it's a softish rubber, but they protrude enough so then you can actually get a hold of whichever button it is that you want to click. These ones, on the other hand, as you can see, they've separated the volume buttons. That was one of the complaints. So the volume up, I believe, on this particular remote has started to become very, very soft. So you have to press it extremely hard for it to actually activate. Whereas obviously this probably solves that issue by separating the buttons. And that just gives you a bit better separation and a bit better tactile click. With this, there can be a tendency to press not where the actual button part is. So the button part is only at the very top. Whereas on this, no matter where you press around that separated button, that will actually work better. So that's a good little change. So two things that they've improved already. So the back cover, the feel of the buttons, these ones, to me, it just seems like they stick out just the tiniest bit further. You should be able to tell that from every single one of these. So the power button, everything just protrudes a tiny bit further out, and that should make it easier for you to click, and hopefully should make them last a bit longer as well. The next change I've noticed is all of these buttons are just slightly chunkier. You can tell that very easily on these ones. So all of your number rows are bigger, as well as your macro keys are bigger as well. In terms of usage, I don't expect these to be any different. So in terms of the way you interact with it, I think they will be exactly the same. And whilst it was simple, it worked. So I don't really see a problem with that. It's not the sort of remote that I would say would be suitable for my setup, because I tend to like everything connecting via Bluetooth and everything being not reliant on infrared, whereas with this, not every device will actually connect via Bluetooth. The other thing I am noticing is the shape and size of it is just slightly different as well. So they have increased the length of the actual remote. So if we hold them level, you can see they've increased the length, and they've also added, whereas on the original one, that is plastic, just a plastic bump. On this one, they have actually added two little rubber studs, so then if you were to place it on a surface, it will actually this one tends to rock, whereas this one should actually grip a bit better. Especially if it's on like a cloth sofa or leather sofa, anything like that. Ergonomically, I think this one does do better as well because it is just slightly thinner. So you will be able to reach more buttons without having to reach around or swivel it in your hands. In terms of the sort of hand grip, it's pretty much identical. I would never actually hold it all the way up. I tend to hold it further down and then just use those ridges on the back whenever you're actually shuffling the remote. In terms of the scroll wheel, they feel exactly the same. This one just being newer probably does have that tiny little bit of more resistance, but the original one, it worked perfectly fine because unless you're adding a lot of devices, you're not having to scroll very far. So generally it's quite responsive in terms of the scroll wheel. Okay, so unboxing done. I have been using both of the remotes for quite a while now. So obviously the original one, I've had that at my parents' house and I've actually made use of that as their primary remote when I'm there. The U2 remote I've been using at my house with all of my setup, and I've basically been using it with everything that I have. So my Hisense L9G, my Zidu player, Apple TV and the Marantz AVR. There are quite a few improvements that I mentioned in the actual unboxing video. So you do have the back cover that now comes off very easily, whereas before that was quite a struggle. You do have the slightly raised buttons as well as some of the buttons being separated. So for example, the volume buttons as well as the up and down arrows, they've been separated. So you actually get more of a tactile click between them. All of the sort of number buttons as well as your function buttons at the bottom have also been increased in size slightly as well. In terms of functionality, that's pretty much exactly the same as the U1, with that being a very simple mechanism in terms of switching between devices. So you just have a scroll button right there and you can switch between all your various devices just like that. Nice and simple, very easy to use even for elderly people or people that aren't that good with technology. That's why I actually do like this particular remote for that purpose. However, the thing that kind of lets it down in my mind and why I won't be using it as my primary device is because of the sort of functionality with the automatic remotes that it's able to find. So if you see here, I actually have the Zidu player, I have another Zidu Z9X, that's actually the Bluetooth connection, I have the Marantz, and then I have the Hisense L9G, and similarly I have two inputs for the L9G as well. Now, the reason I'm having to do this is because when you add any device via infrared, pretty much most of the functions will work. So for example, your volume, your mute, your up and down arrows, your play pause, all of that kind of stuff will work pretty much every time. However, whenever you connect via Bluetooth, most of those functions don't actually work. So for example, when I connected to my L9G via the built-in sort of Bluetooth connection, because there's only a few devices that it does actually recognize, most of the functions on the remote didn't actually work. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can go into any remote that you've selected and you can actually customize each button, and you can actually choose from other remotes that you've added. So for example, just here I have the Hisense, and then below it I have the L9G. I can actually switch buttons between those two to do different functionality, and similarly I can actually choose any remote that I've actually got selected and choose to copy that remote's functions over onto another remote. The problem being is most of that is still infrared, so you still require everything to be in line of sight for it to work. So it needs that ability to actually transmit that infrared signal. Switching between Bluetooth devices isn't really that much of an issue. It isn't slow or anything. It does tend to connect relatively quickly, so that's not really that big of an issue. It's more just down to the fact that the functionality just isn't there. So for example, one of the things that I really like on another remote is with my projector I can select just the picture mode selection button. That's not actually on the original remote, but I was able to find it on third-party remotes via the sort of customization of those particular remotes. Now, the problem with this one is you don't actually get that functionality, or it doesn't work if you select the built-in selection. I think the only thing that actually worked initially was the up and down arrows and the OK. The volume didn't work, none of your other functionality actually worked. So that's where it kind of lets itself down, in the sense that, yeah, you can go in and you can customize all these remotes, but you're having to customize all these remotes in order for it to do what you want it to do. Whereas there are other remotes on the market that I've tested on my channel that do actually allow you to do that straight away. You don't need to go in and customize remotes in order for that functionality to work. Overall, I'd say this is a good upgrade on the U1, but it's not really, I wouldn't say, suitable for somebody like me, where I've got various devices that I like to be able to connect to via Bluetooth and use certain functions that work every single time. Whereas this is almost set up for those that want a very basic remote just to be able to control multiple devices, or for somebody who's willing to actually spend the time to go in and delve into all the macro functions and customize each button individually. Another little kind of quirk of the actual setup was when I actually connected it to my Marantz AVR, because I've got that set to reference, which is in negative numbers essentially. It goes from negative 75 all the way up to 0 and then plus 12, I think it is. Whenever I click the volume up, it actually puts the volume down because it's actually increasing the number, but because it's in negatives, it's actually decreasing the volume, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's one of those things where you have to go in and you have to switch the functionality between the volume up and volume down every single time. Another weird little thing that they always seem to do is whenever you press the volume up or volume down, rather than just going in one numerical number increments, it'll actually jump up or down maybe 5 or 3 or something like that to speed up how quickly or how slowly the volume actually increases or decreases. And that can be quite annoying, especially if you've got it to almost where you want it and you press volume up and it jumps quite high or it jumps too low. So that's one of those weird kind of quirks that I found with it as well. I'd say this is a very good remote for anybody that just wants a very simple smart remote where they can add in all of their additional devices. The app functionality is very, very simple once you actually connect to it. In order to connect to the app, you literally just hold these two buttons. That puts the remote into pairing mode. That's the same thing regardless of what you're actually connecting it to as well. So for example, if you want to connect this to a Bluetooth enabled device that isn't on their app, then you can actually just put it into pairing mode, go into the settings of that device and actually pair it up. Now the downside is, once again, it will only pull the functionality that is on this remote. So for example, it'll pull the numerical numbers, it'll pull your up and down actions, it'll pull your OK button, your volume, all that kind of stuff, but it won't pull any additional features or settings, as well as not always having these function buttons actually work. So for example, the menu button didn't really work on any of the devices I connected it to. It didn't work on the Zedo, it didn't work on the Apple TV, and it didn't work on my Hisense L9G either, whereas the home button did actually work on the L9G, and it essentially means you have to go to home, go to settings manually, and then it would get you into settings, or you would have to go in and customize that settings button by essentially selecting a second or a third Hisense device from the actual list. So rather than just having two there, you end up with quite a lot of multiples of the same device or the same remote. I'd say it's a pretty decent upgrade from the actual original one, but it's not something that I personally will be using. I probably will once again give this to my parents because they actually quite enjoyed using the U1, and just having that extra sort of functionality of the better tactile click between these various buttons probably will be useful to them. With the previous remote, I was already noticing that the volume up did need to be pressed quite a bit harder in order for it to actually work compared to the volume down. So yeah, I will have a link in the description below. If you have any questions about how to set it up or anything like that, just drop them down in the comment section below and I will do my best to answer them. I am in contact with SofaBaton. They did actually send the remote out for review. There's no fee or anything been exchanged in exchange for this actual video. It was literally just, they just wanted me to have a look at it and go over obviously the things that I mentioned in my original video that they've actually gone away and tried to improve on, but also get some feedback in terms of what customers actually feel. So obviously if you do have any thoughts or any comments, drop them in the comment section below and I'll do my best to forward them on. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. And I really appreciate if you could also give this video a thumbs up. And until the next one, thanks very much for watching.